Okay, back to the action. What are you laughing at? All right, we had a complicated day yesterday, so we do want to review this. And we're going to be starting on page 180 when we actually take it from inside. I believe we got up to the very last paragraph on page 180. Okay, so just real quick. We were off explaining the complication of the Torah Chadasha when it came to the side of halacha. We said one of the explanations is that Mashiach is going to come and change the halacha, particularly this halacha of the shechita of the Leviathan. And we said that we're going to use the same principle that we've been working on, which is that there is no new Torah, but rather a chiddush in Torah of Mashiach is compared to the chiddush that we have now. In other words, just finding something that was already there. The only difference is, in this case, we're going to find something so deep that man could never find, and therefore Mashiach had to be a prophet, right? But before we get to the but, and therefore, when it comes to how that translates in our case, it turns out that this permissibility of this shechita is not a new law. It was always part of the laws of shechita. No one ever saw such a law before. It's because Mashiach is going to receive from prophecy that this is the case, right? And then he's going to be wiser than Shlomo in order to explain to us in our little world of humans how it actually makes sense. And so Rabbi goes basically describing that this is the background of the scenario, and therefore it is called Torah Chadasha, because if we would explain it the way the Mefarshim of old explained it, we were left with this idea that it was called a Horat Shah, right? That the only way we came up with in the past to explain how there's going to be such a change in the laws is that Mashiach was going to come and actually break the law, but he was going to do that with permission, because any prophet is allowed to do that with permission. But we said if he's going to do that, it shouldn't be called Torah Chadasha, because that's part of the regular Torah. Any prophet can come along. What we're trying to prove is that it's actually not breaking the law. It's actually part of the laws of Shechita. It's just that it was never known until Mashiach revealed it through prophecy. And then he brings this basic Torah construct from the Rogachover in order to enable us to understand how something like this is already found in Torah, so we can sort of filter it into our human brains. And what was this? It was the law of shchutei chutz, right? If you remember what this is, you're not allowed to shecht an animal for slaughter or anything outside of the Beis HaMikdash. You're not allowed to shecht and slaughter an animal outside the Beis HaMikdash. And Eliyahu HaNavi did it, right? And so up until the Rogachover, we were under the impression that he was able to do that because he was actually breaking the laws of shchutei chutz with the power of Horat Shah, right? The ability to make a temporary injunction and break the laws if you're a prophet like Eliyahu. But the Rogachover explained that that's not what he did, and he learned this out by the fact that there's that in another place, not in the area where we learn about the laws of Horat Shah, which is a pasuk from Shoftim, Elav Tishma'un. You have to listen to the prophet, whatever he tells you. Rashi seemingly strangely brings this whole thing out in the pasuk, which has to do with shchutei chutz, right? Which basically says, what is the pasuk exactly? Here, Hishamar lecha pen taleh olosecha b'chol makam asher tireh. Right, there's a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh which says, "Guard yourself lest you bring up an offering in any old place that you want." And then Rashi brings as an addendum to this law, unless you're Eliyahu HaNavi, who's going to bring up an offering on Har Carmel, which means that as far as Rashi is concerned, this is not a throwback to the law of Horat Shah, but rather this is part and parcel of the laws of shchutei chutz, that there's an exception to those laws, which is that when Eliyahu HaNavi does it, he's not breaking the laws of shchutei chutz, but rather he's following those laws because those laws were given with one exception, and that when he does it in this particular time in history, it's mutter. He didn't have to break the law. It's part of the laws. It's mutter. Exactly as we've been saying about the Leviathan. It's not something new. And the Rebbe is basically saying there's precedent for this. And then he gives one more example in the footnote. That's where we left off yesterday regarding Shabbos, right? Where he says when we're allowed to offer the two Tamidim of Shabbos, it's not like Pikuach Nefesh, where you're allowed to break Shabbos in order to save a life. Shabbos laws can be, so to speak, suspended. In this case, it's part of the laws of Shabbos that you're allowed to go against Shabbos in the area of these two Tamidim. So in other words, there's like a heter built into the laws. So we see that it's not so crazy. There is precedent for such a thing. No one told us that about the law of the Vyasan until the Torah Hadasha man is going to come around and tell us. But after he does tell us, it's not like he's telling us something we never heard before, because such a principle has already been found in the Torah. That's what we said yesterday. Yeah.
It came up in talking today. Someone mentioned that there's another example. Like, isn't it part of the correct me if I'm wrong? So like the Kohen Gadol's garments that are allowed to be made out of shatnez.
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of is that sort of similar thing where it's like a carve out. It's not like Kohen Gadol is allowed to break the prohibition of shatnez.
Right.
Like
Yeah. You can say that. Yeah, it's mutter. It's even a mitzvah, right? It's a mitzvah for him to wear those. Yeah. So yeah. Good call. All right, so let's take a look. We go forward inside. If we just learned that, we'd be like, wow, that's the greatest sikh I've ever learned. But it's like literally just the beginning of like so many pearls of wisdom. You have no idea. Yeah. So he goes on in the bottom of page 180, the last paragraph on page 180. You see it? Va'af. Shechidish zeh. Even though this chidish, eino yechol izgalos agdei talmid vasik, right? It couldn't come out through a regular student. In other words, like a gullus level sage. Yeah, veteran sage, but like before Mashiach. Shalom alpi klali Torah, where he learns this where he's just learning the basic principles of Torah. Ki im al yedei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, this has to come out directly from Hashem, right? Eino bichlal haTorah shelo b'shamayim. So even though, according to the Rebbe's principle, no man could have found this, only God through a prophet, nonetheless, we're not going to call this transgressing this prohibition of Torah is not in heaven. Right? Why? Yesh lomar shemelech HaMashiach, because Melech HaMashiach, once again, is Baal Chochma Yaser Mishlomo. He's so wise. Yivar v'yilamed ha-chidush Torah. He's going to come and explain this chidush Torah, which essentially is happening before our eyes, in the Beis Din Hagadol Shebiyerushalayim. In other words, we don't have the Beis Din Hagadol Shebiyerushalayim yet, so there's no one to convince this to, right? But if there should be a Beis Din Hagadol Shebiyerushalayim, Mashiach will come and he'll explain this in the mind of the sages who make the Torah. In such a way that they will accept it. In other words, not as prophecy. They're going to accept it as a brilliant idea, which is al pi klali Torah, which goes according to the principles of Torah, which is not in Shemayim. And since they define the will of God, they are the Torah Shabbat Peh. It's not like, right, whatever they say is the Torah Shabbat Peh. That's like the original concept of the Torah Shabbat Peh, is that it's pretty much malleable based on what the Sanhedrin says. So if they come up and they suddenly say, yes, we paskin that this is kosher, then it's part of Torah. It's not part of prophecy anymore. They are the pillar upon which all instruction and laws come out from. It's from them that the laws come out for the Jewish people. So it becomes basically, again, part of Torah, not prophecy. Therefore, you're going to have to mix these two things together. This wondrous new novelty of Torah, which did come out from God, right, will be like Devarim Shalamdu Osam Mipi Hashmua, Devarim Shalamdu Mipi Datam Be'achas Min Amido Shator Nijeshes Behem Benira Be'ineihem Shadavar Zeh Kahu. So just to translate, he's basically saying, even though it came from God, it will transfer and translate into those matters that they learned from tradition, or things that they understood from their own understanding by utilizing one of the principles of Torah that we're allowed to use in order to mine new information from the Torah. And they'll see this is not prophetic. This is totally rational and normal. Like we just gave 4 or 5 examples for this thing. Like, yeah, duh, shotness. You know what I'm saying? Like you find this all over the place. So it's going to wind up being so totally human and rational, even though no one ever thought of it before. And like the principle of it, according to the Midrash, is a Torah Chadash. I mean, it comes from God, essentially. It's pretty wild. Okay, let's go looking back for some footnotes. I'm having some second thoughts on these footnotes. No, it's just a long one. Should we give it a go? Let's give it a go. Why not? So we're going back a little bit on what it said. This is not going against the principle of Torah lo b'shamayim hi, right? If in other words, if a prophet's going to come and tell us this, seemingly it goes against this principle that Torah is not in heaven. So on this, the Rabbi has footnote 38. You with me? Yiser mizeh. He says, not only is it not going against that principle, but even furthermore, afilu be'inyan shenechlaku chachmei Yisrael, even in certain matters that the sages argued on. Shebeis hasvaros hem b'seichel ha'adam shalom al pi klal Torah, which means if two sages of sort of Gullus era are arguing on them, that means these are two ideas that even the mind of man can have found according to the principles of Torah. Even there, in other words, in a normal argument, yesh chiluki deas im efshar lismoch al hodas mishamayim. Even there's kind of there's a questionable opinion if you're able to rely on a heavenly voice. In other words, it's just because something comes from heaven does not exclude it wholesale from being in the realm of Torah. That's true in our case, and even before we get to Mashiach's times, we have dealt with opinions from heaven before. Right? And there's a whole argument about when we listen to them and we don't listen to them. In other words, it plays in. There's such a thing called a bas kol. You may have heard of it, a heavenly voice. Shomeres halacha kaploni, that says the halacha goes like such and so. What do we do with such a bas kol, right? If Torah lo b'shamayim hi, is there any time, first of all, why does Hashem come down and say the halacha goes like so and so, right? And for example, we're going to see soon the famous example of this, that it says they argued for years and years, Hillel and Shammai, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, until a bas kol came down and said, what? Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chaim, v'halacha ke Hillel. Right? So we actually went, according to this bas kol, that we did take a position from heaven. We're going to see exactly how and why that works. But the point he's trying to make here in this footnote is that don't be so concerned entirely that we're dealing with heavenly voices entering into halacha, because even before Mashiach, such a thing plays its role. And he goes further. Right? When in the Gemara of Bava Metzia, it says that there is an argument in the heavenly yeshiva, whether the halacha goes like God, who gave his opinion in that heavenly Masifta, who said such and such a appearance of tsaras is pure, right? As the author writes a whole very long and wondrous mimer about this in Parshas Tazri and Likutei Torah, and it says the Rambam in the end of the halachas of Metzura, he paskins like the Masifta, the Sveiku Tameh. In other words, he doesn't hold like Hashem. Right? There's an argument that goes on there. The Shiva basically comes and votes it's tahor. God says tameh. God says it's tahor. Rambam paskins like the Masifta, right? And he says, and it's written in many places, Mishum the Tanakam of Rabbi Yehoshua pligi bezeh in Sof Perek Daled Nagaim. It's because there's an argument between the first Tana and Rabbi Yehoshua in the end of chapter 4 of the laws of Nagoim of Tzaras. V'halacha katana kama, and the halacha goes like the first Tana. V'afagav dekut shabrichu omer Torah lo b'shamayim. And we have this general concept that even though Hashem said it's pure, we rely on the fact of saying Torah is not in heaven. However, it says that in Sof Perek Daled Nagoim Mashma Halacha Rabbi Yehoshua Mishum Dekush Baruch Hamatar. But however, there's dissenting opinions that say that wait a second, we're going to hold not like the Tanakama, but rather like Rabbi Yehoshua. Why? Because God was on his side, and this is a debate amongst Rambam doesn't paskin like that, but others do, and they're basically saying because God was on the side of those who said pure. Mavar shedargaso shel Rabbi bar Nachmani. Sha'amar ani yachid ben Agoyim, and it's explained that the level of this one who basically said he was the greatest in the Goyim, in the laws of impurity of Tzaras, whose name was Rabbi Bar Nachmani, basically Rabba, right? He said, Ani Yachid ben Agoyim. He said, he declared himself as the primary greatest expert in these laws. Above all the sages in his generation. So his, so to speak, opinion was shaykh to the way that Hashem understood it. And because he understood it in such a high way, it was almost like his way of understanding it was beyond the grasp of the majority of people. He understood it, so to speak, the truth. We understood it the way Hashem understood it, and therefore the majority were against him because they couldn't understand what he was saying. And we have a law in Torah. We paskin achrei Rabbi Mahatos. We paskin after the majority, even if the minority are smarter and are seeing things the way God sees things. It doesn't help us, and that's why the Rambam paskins like the Tanna Kama, right? And Rabbi Shimon paskins like Rabbi Yoshua, right? So there's a machloikis, right? In other words, why? And why would we have a dissenting opinion on the Rambam? I lost all of you guys, I'm sure, about 5 minutes ago. But why would we have a dissenting opinion on the Rambam when we don't go? In other words, when we go after the majority, even if the minority sees things the way God does. Because he'll say, in this case, it's different. We don't go after the majority. Why? Because when do we go after the majority? It's when the sages of the Mishnah are arguing with each other. In other words, when men are arguing, we go after the majority. But here, we'll say there's a reason to go according to the minority because you've changed the scope of this conversation. The minority in this case is God. And all end of footnote. What do we hear from here? That even in the discussions of today's halachas, there are opinions. Okay, Rambam doesn't paskin that way, but others, Rabbi Shimon does. Like he holds like Rabbi Yoshua, not like the Tanna Kama. Why? Because God paskin like that. So in other words, even in today's halachas, there are ways of sometimes going in according to Torah opinions that come from heaven. So it's not totally crazy even in the, so to speak, laws of Torah. Everyone lost?
Okay.
High five. I told you I wasn't sure about going into that footnote, but we did it. So
that's not the opinion. That's a opinion. That's not like the.
Again, there's the machlokes, right?
Yeah.
Rambam. The truth is, we don't have. I guess if you would say, how do we rule? Yeah. We probably would rule like the Rambam because there are no real dissenting opinions against the Rambam in laws having to do with saras, because the halacha like discussions that came out in the Shulchan Aruch don't deal with laws that are not relevant to us today. So he might not have dissenting other sages. But the point is, in the Gemara, it's not clear that that's the only opinion. The Gemara is also nigla, right? And so basically there's opinions that hold that because Hashem was on the side of Tahor, we should vote Tahor. It goes against going according to the laws of majority. Yeah, but that majority rules only when you're dealing with men majority. But if God's in the minority, there's such a concept that you go there. Anyway, it's a little bit wild stuff there. All right, but all he's trying to say is going against this law of lo b'shamayim like the Torah is not in heaven. It has levels and dark. It's not so simple. Okay, fine. Moving right along. Let's go into another whole area of chapter 6. Since in these two matters, what are the two matters we're talking about right now? The Chiddush and the revelation of the secrets of the Torah, that which is called Torah Chadasha, and the Chiddush in the halachas of the Torah, namely the permissibility of the shchit of the shurabar with the fins of the Leviathan. Since these two are the two explanations of what it means, the new Torah, we could probably say, says the Rebbe, logically, there's a connection between them. In other words, what is Torah Chadasha? Does it mean making this shchita kosher? Or does it mean revealing all the secrets of God into the world? Obviously, those two things are the two definitions. They have a connection with each other. We're taking this into a whole different turn now, which means that the change in halachas, not only the halacha of this particular shchita, but as we're going to see, there could be a vast number of changes in halacha, All the changes in halacha are going to come as a result of the intense level of divine revelation that's going to come out in the Pnimius Torah. They're not two independent definitions of Torah Chadasha. They're synonymous, right? Halachas will change because the Pnimius is going to be revealed. The Tzrich Bir, we have to understand. Maya Shaykhas the Chidish Torah the Shadini Shchita Lo Nemrim Nogel Shchita Shurabarbas Napira Liviasan. What exactly is the connection then? He's reiterating his question. You're telling me there's a connection, but please enlighten me. What exactly has the permissibility of the fin shchita have to do with revealing of all the secrets of the Torah? That's try that one out. To the point that the revelation of this thing, whatever it is in the future, the Torah Chadasha, is specifically that's going to happen, that permissibility of that shechita, with all the secrets of the Torah suddenly revealed. In other words, thanks, like now I know all the infinite wisdom of God, kosher shechita. What's the connection? V'yesh levar, chapter Zayin, he says we can explain. Behek b'agdamas dugmas hanal, in an example of all we've been speaking about up until now, in shinoi, in the halachas of the Torah of Lasi Lavo, in all other manner of changes in the Torah of the future, shekashor im darga nalis yosef b'Torah, we're going to find when there's a higher revelation of Torah, other laws change as well. And he says, where do we see this? In the arguments between Shammai and Hillel. Yeah.
What does the dogma mean?
Example. It means example. You should be a dugma chaya, a living example, as you are. Okay, so again, we're trying to find out how this unique change of law of the shechita is connected with the secrets of the Torah. So he says, look, let's look for an example of that. How other laws of the Torah will change in the future based on revelations of the secrets of the Torah. And he's going to bring us into this world right now. Isa b'Gemara. It says in the Gemara, Shalosh shanim nechlaku beis Shammai beis Hillel. For 3 years, the house of Shammai and Hillel argued. Halalu omrim halacha kamoseinu. These said the halacha goes like us. Halalu omrim halacha kamoseinu. The others said the halacha goes like us. Right? That must have been a tough year for the Jewish people, those 3 years. Imagine not having a clear answer. There's rabbis on all sides telling you totally opposite things on pretty much every law in the Torah.
Gives you a lot of room, though.
So, you got to choose sides, right? It doesn't give you a lot of room. It gives you a big choice to make, right? So it says, what happened after these 3 years? Yatsa Basko, remember our Basko? We're bringing him back. Va'amra Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chayim hein v'halacha kabeis Hillel.
So basically, they're both saying both the answers are right, but for now it's according to Beit Hillel.
Yes, that's right. They're both words of the living God. In other words, no one's just saying bedtime stories over here. They're speaking words of God, both sides. But the halacha goes like Hillel. Who said that? A divine voice.
Yeah, who heard the Basko?
I think all the Talmidim there.
Beit Hillel and Beit Hillel,
Yeah.
both yeshivas?
Yes. They were arguing together. That's what I understood. Right? We can look further in the Gemara of Eruv in Yud Gimel Beis if you want to check that out. You can find out more details there. Now, we have a problem, don't we? Ein mashgichim b'basko. We have a standing law, which we sort of referenced a second ago. We confused the waters a little bit, but let's keep it simple. We don't listen to a basko, right? Kevan shat Torah lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven, right? Everyone knows the story of Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer with the oven.
Yeah.
That the Basko came and he said, if I'm right, let the walls of this base medrash fall. They started to fall. They said, and they still didn't paskin like him because we don't listen to a Basko. We have to go by the majority. So even these two are arguing. It wasn't two people. It was the whole house of Hillel, the house of Shammai. They were arguing for 3 years. A Basko comes down and says the halach is like Beis Hillel. What should they have said? Shkoyach, go home. We're going to continue arguing. We don't listen to a Basko. So what's this? Because we have laws. Only if, right? Hashem, according to what we said in that other weird footnote, which I'm skeptical to even bring up anymore, but only if Hashem was one of the parties that was arguing, right? In that case, then according to Rabbi Shimon, maybe you can hold like Hashem, even though the halacha doesn't go like that. But what we're saying here is that no, Hashem was entering into somebody else's argument. Two sages were arguing. They have to figure it out themselves. We don't listen to a baskol. And yet here, the truth is, not only do we listen to that baskol, everything in Torah from that moment on was solved for all generations. Nobody holds like Beis Shammai, and they never until from that point on, until Mashiach comes.
Wow.
Right? So in other words, we did listen to the baskol. And the question is how. But in order to answer this, we have to tune in tomorrow. All right. Here you go.
You're proud of that.